Right, hi guys, and welcome back to the Moaning Yorkshireman, and welcome back to a slightly different video on the channel. This one's more of personal intrigue for me, and I thought you might find it intriguing as well. I was looking on YouTube just to see if anyone had actually covered this so I could find any more detail out about it. But no, there's been relatively just a couple of like news outlets that have put this news out there. But no motorsport related channels or Formula 1 related channels or anything have covered it, which I'm surprised about because it is quite a big topic and a big talking point. So let's get into it, shall we? So Gerhard Berger's Ferrari F512M Testarossa has been found after almost 29 years of being missing, after being stolen during the Imola Grand Prix Weekend back in 1995. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it? It's the longest missing car in history to be found now, certainly within the terms of the UK, because it has been found on British soil. The Met Police have found it after investigations of this car coming back into the country towards the end of last year. 2023. Yeah, they've had a look at it, and Ferrari were initially a little bit concerned about it and weren't quite aware of what was happening. Basically what was happening is the car was coming in from Japan, and was obviously its stopover was in the UK to then be furthered on to the US. So it's a US buyer from a UK broker. So it's all a little bit intertwined and a little bit intertwingled, but basically the car has ended up into the UK. And suspicions were raised. The US buyer put a form in and like to Ferrari and said, "Look, I'm buying this car. Is it legit?" Like Ferrari and any big supercar manufacturer or people like Rolls-Royce, they have the records for every single car they've ever produced and who it belonged to and everything. You know, databases only go so far for regular people like ourselves with regular cars, but for Ferrari and things, they've got things on the database, and they looked at it and initially flagged it straight up and were like, something's not right with that car, but we just can't work out what it is. So when it came to the UK, they said to the Met Police, Ferrari got in contact with the Met Police and said, "Look, you need to get involved with this. This car is not legit. There's something wrong with it. Can you investigate further?" So after more thorough investigations by the Met Police and finding out obviously the VIN number of the car and where it originally came from and things like that, they discovered that this Ferrari Testarossa that turned up almost 29 years after it was stolen, it was Gerhard Berger's Ferrari, which is just unbelievable, isn't it? So the whole story of it was that after the Imola Grand Prix weekend back in April 1995, Gerhard Berger was outside the fancy hotel he was staying in, and he noticed that his car that was on loan from Ferrari was getting moved out of the car park. He's like, hang on a minute, that's my car, someone's nicking my car. So he decided to launch himself in front of the vehicle as it was exiting the car park to try and bring the car to a halt, like any sane person would that's about to have their Ferrari stolen. And obviously this Ferrari was not stopping. So he leapt out the way, then decided to take custody of his friend's Volkswagen Golf and drove it down the streets and twisty streets of Italy to try and keep up with it. But a Ferrari Testarossa against a Volkswagen Golf proved fruitless, I'm afraid. So the car was missing in action from there. The Italian police made some investigations and made some inquiries and had a look around and had a dig around and see where it could go. They believed, of course, it was an organised crime gang that stole the vehicle, and they believed it was headed out for the Middle East, and then nothing more was done about it, nothing more was said. I'll put some pictures of the car up here for you now that I've got from the Telegraph. But yeah, you know, the car itself looks in really good condition relatively, but the steering wheel looks a bit aftermarket, and also the interior does look used. So this car was only a few days old when it first came out and when it was given to Gerhard Berger by Ferrari. So it looks like it's been shipped over to Japan and actually led a life out there for all these years, and it's only, I mean, maybe it was bought by a legitimate buyer out there once it was stolen, not knowing it was stolen, and then obviously after all these years he's decided he wants to get rid of it. He's gone through a UK broker to obviously get the car shipped to the US buyer, and then that's when the issues have all come into play. So far no arrests have been made, because obviously I think it's just going to be a cold case that's never going to be solved. It seems like the guy that owned it in Japan was a legitimate person. The broker from the UK, okay, fair enough, maybe has not done his due diligence enough and done enough into the vehicle itself before accepting it to be brought over from Japan to the UK and then on to the US. And the US buyer, of course, doing his regular routine of he's purchased the vehicle now. Best do some checks on it. I'll get in contact with Ferrari, and Ferrari have raised the red flag to the Metropolitan Police, who have done their investigations and found out that, yeah, it was the one that was stolen from Gerhard Berger back in Imola 1995. So what a life that car has led, really. It seems to have been stolen while it was relatively new, never to be seen again, and then almost 30 years later turns up in the UK after living a life so long in Japan. Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, the car itself is a very limited edition car. Only 501 of the Testarossa F512Ms were produced. They were a little bit quicker than the regular Testarossa, and it meant that, of course, the value of the car is around about £350,000. Now, obviously, Ferrari are saying that they're going to hopefully get the car back and would look to get it back to Italy. Of course, Ferrari did own the car. It wasn't owned by Gerhard Berger. It was on loan, of course, Gerhard Berger being a Ferrari driver at the time. The only issue it comes in with, obviously, is if Ferrari ever got an insurance payout for it, then technically that car would belong to the insurers, so then Ferrari would have to pay the insurers back, and then they could have the car. But Ferrari are Ferrari. I'm sure they'll sort it out amongst themselves, and I'm pretty sure that car will go into the Ferrari collection, maybe a museum of some description. And I think the value of £350,000 for that type of car, with the story it's got behind it now, will increase heavily. You know, you think, what a cool story. It was driven by Gerhard Berger. It was stolen. It led a life in Japan. It's come back to the UK, and almost 30 years later, it's the biggest or longest case of a missing car finally being found for the UK. Anyway, I'm not sure how it works for worldwide and Europe and things, but yeah, for the UK at least, almost 29 years after going missing, it has been solved. The mystery has been solved. Not only that, during that weekend, of course, there was another Ferrari stolen by Gerhard Berger's teammate Jean Alesi. He had his Ferrari 355 stolen from him in a silver colour that has not reared its head. It was stolen at the same weekend. Jean Alesi didn't see it get stolen. He had nothing to go on. It just turned up one morning and it was gone. So, yeah, that one is still very much missing in action, but of course inquiries are now leading to the fact that both were possibly shipped to Japan, so further inquiries are happening over in Japan now to see whether anyone's got a silver Ferrari 355 out there, because they might be getting an unexpected knock at the door and saying, I'm really sorry, you might have bought this car legitimately, but it's unfortunately stolen and belongs to Ferrari. I mean, what a cool story. So yeah, of course, I do feel sorry for all buyers involved and sellers involved, etc., that have clearly been caught up in this scandal, because, of course, it seems like it's legitimate, that all the people that were involved are legitimate and nothing to do with the initial theft. But, of course, they're all going to be out of pocket substantially now, because the US buyer's not getting his car. The seller out in Japan will, of course, be having to give the money back, because it was through stolen means. It was through you know, ill-gotten gains, isn't it, is what they call it. So he won't be keeping that money, and of course the UK broker that was sorting everything out in terms of the transportation will be losing out heavily as well. So it certainly comes as a cost to the people that are involved with this, but overall a nice story to find that a car being missing so long gets found. But certainly it's a good news story in the sense that a car with a lot of prevalent history now has suddenly turned up, and I think that car's easily going to be worth millions now. It's like the Lamborghini Countach out of the Wolf of Wall Street, isn't it? It was a limited edition, incredibly rare car that they smashed to pieces, and it sold for millions at auction because it was the Wolf of Wall Street Lamborghini that smashed to pieces. It sold for more than one that's in immaculate condition. I think this is going to be the case of this Ferrari now. Any, you know, multi-millionaire that loves a cool story and loves a car with history is going to straight want to go for that Ferrari, and could potentially be worth millions if sold in the future. But for now, Ferrari are looking to get it back anyway. So yeah, that's it basically. Gerhard Berger's Ferrari has been recovered after 29 years, and Ferrari are hoping to get it back. The 355 that was Jean Alesi's is still very much missing though, so maybe, just maybe, this will spur everyone on now, and it'll lead to investigations that mean that the other Ferrari is found as well, so you could have a pair of stolen vehicles almost 30 years ago turn up, which is absolutely crackers. So that's pretty much all I've got to say on that. Yeah, his Ferrari has been found, and let's see where it turns up next. Will it turn up in a museum? Will it go to a private collector? Who knows, but Ferrari hoping to very much get it back, of course. So let me know down in the comments if you enjoyed this video. Like I say, it wasn't something I was planning on making. It's not something I usually do. But I just felt it was a really interesting story. Too interesting not to cover, and no one else had covered it. So there you go. Thanks a lot for watching, guys, and as always, much love.